Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and investigate a truly strange medical mystery. We're going to map out the fascinating and, honestly, often terrifying biological connection between our inner ears and our deepest anxieties. If you've ever felt dizzy, unsteady, or suddenly heard ringing in your ears during moments of high stress, well, you know exactly how alarming it can be. Today, we're finally getting to the bottom of it.
Why can a tiny problem in your ear cause a profound feeling of impending doom? Look, it sounds like an exaggeration, right? But it really isn't. For so many people, a small disruption in the balance centers of the ear doesn't just make them feel a bit off balance, it makes them feel like the world is literally ending. Our goal with this explainer is to completely validate those terrifying symptoms. What you're feeling is a real physiological phenomenon. It is absolutely not just all in your head.
To do that, we'll quickly map out the vertigo-anxiety loop, the vital hippocampus connection, cognitive and spatial disruptions, phantom sounds, and wrap up with steps to normalize sensitivity.
Starting off with Section 1, the vertigo-anxiety loop.
So there's this vicious cycle where physical stress responses directly disrupt your balance, which then turns right around and causes even more psychological panic. Think about it. When you get anxious, your fight-or-flight response kicks in. But this isn't just a mental state. Your muscles, especially in your jaw, your neck, and your shoulders, they just tighten up, and your breathing gets fast and shallow. That physical tension can actually mechanically interfere with the delicate communication between your inner ear and your brain. The result? You feel dizzy or lightheaded. And what happens when you suddenly feel dizzy out of nowhere? Your anxiety spikes even higher, and bam, you restart the whole loop.
And if you've been stuck in this, you are definitely not alone. Get this, more than 35% of surveyed individuals report phantom sounds as part of this exact anxiety loop. That is huge. More than a third of people dealing with chronic anxiety report their ears constantly playing tricks on them. Ringing, buzzing, hissing, you name it. But to understand why this happens, we really need to look deeper into the brain's actual architecture.
Moving to Section 2, the hippocampus connection. Okay, the crucial starting point here is defining vestibular asymmetry. I want you to think of your two inner ears as twin GPS units that are continuously sending spatial coordinates to your brain. Vestibular asymmetry is essentially the mechanical mismatch of that data. Suddenly, one engine is sending completely different information than the other. When one GPS says you're turning left and the other says you're standing perfectly still, your brain is just thrown into complete neurological chaos.
Normally, balanced ear signals give you a smooth, steady experience of the world. But asymmetrical signals? They act like a corrupted computer file. The brain doesn't know which ear to trust, so it has to work serious overtime, intensely cross-referencing visual cues and muscle tension just to keep you from falling over. And let me tell you, that takes massive amounts of raw neurological energy.
Now here's where it all clicks together. Your vestibular system actually shares direct, hardwired neural pathways with the hippocampus, which is your brain's primary spatial mapping center, and the amygdala, your core fear center. So when bad asymmetrical balance data floods the hippocampus, it doesn't just cause a little confusion. It instantly triggers the amygdala. You aren't just feeling unsteady. Your brain's alarm bell is literally being rung by a mechanical error. This is exactly why a simple inner ear imbalance triggers such an intense, visceral anxiety response before you even have a fraction of a second to consciously process what's happening. Which brings us to Section 3, cognitive and spatial disruptions. When the hippocampus gets overwhelmed by this mismatched data from the ears, it generally leads to three primary clinical disruptions. First up is cognitive dysfunction. You might experience this intense brain fog or find it basically impossible to concentrate. Why? Because your brain is draining all of its processing power just trying to figure out which way is up. Second is spatial disorientation. You might feel incredibly clumsy, kind of like you're walking on the deck of a rocking boat, constantly having to consciously manage your balance instead of it just happening automatically. And third, extreme emotional anxiety. Because that amygdala is firing rapidly right alongside the overwhelmed hippocampus, you feel a profound, seemingly unexplainable sense of panic.
Just listen to this observation from neurologist Dr. P. Ashley Wackham. He notes, patients may describe a feeling of impending doom or that something really bad is going to happen. Dr. Wackham's research perfectly validates that this intense fear is a mechanical output of the brain dealing with bad data. It's not a psychological failing on your part. It is a strictly biological response to vestibular asymmetry. And honestly, knowing this alone brings massive relief to patients who previously thought they were literally losing their minds.
Let's look at Section 4,
hyperstimulation and sounds.
It's a question that drives people absolutely crazy. Why do I hear ringing or buzzing if the room is completely quiet? Why does the brain suddenly start interpreting total silence as a symphony of static?
Well, the answer lies in the clinical mechanisms of how our nervous system adapts to chronic stress. When your nervous system enters a state of chronic hyperstimulation, it basically forgets how to return to its baseline resting state. Consequently, the actual electrical sensitivity of your auditory nerve spikes. It becomes incredibly hyperexcitable, kind of like a microphone turned up way too high. It either generates spontaneous sound signals on its own, or it detects internal bodily noises that normally fall well below the threshold of conscious hearing. Your stressed nervous system is literally producing and detecting sounds that simply aren't there in the outside environment.
These phantom sounds you hear are real perceptual events. For instance, ringing and buzzing often fluctuate directly with your stress levels. A rushing or pulsing sound? That's actually your hypersensitized ear picking up the turbulent blood flow in nearby vessels, which naturally increases when your heart rate goes up from anxiety. And hissing or static often seems way louder in quiet environments because of hypervigilance. Your anxious brain is actively scanning the environment for threats, forcing you to pay extra, hyper-focused attention to all that internal noise.
Finally, Section 5. Steps to normalize sensitivity. Let's fix this.
Practical, science-backed steps are the absolute key to cooling down your hyperstimulated nervous system and allowing that ear-brain connection to repair. First, deep relaxation and controlled breathing. This directly counters the fight-or-flight response, signaling safety back to the brain. Next, avoiding stimulants like caffeine. You want to prevent artificially spiking your nerve sensitivity even further. Restorative sleep is absolutely non-negotiable. That is when your nervous system actually undergoes repair. Crucially, you've got to stop anxiously monitoring the symptoms. Checking to see if your ears are still ringing only tells your brain the ringing is important, which keeps the sensitivity turned all the way up. And finally, targeted vestibular rehabilitation exercises can actively retrain your brain to process balance signals correctly again.
Now, it is crucial to remember that recovery is progressive. You cannot force a hyperstimulated nervous system to calm down instantly through sheer willpower. It just doesn't work that way. The brain can and will recover its baseline, but it requires deep patience and a gradual, consistent reduction in your overall stress load. The phantom sounds and the dizzy spells will ultimately fade as that underlying hyperstimulation resolves. Ultimately, calming the mind heals the ear, and healing the ear calms the mind. Breaking the loop requires a dedicated dual approach. You have to address the physical balance issues through therapy and exercise while simultaneously regulating your nervous system to dial down the anxiety. They're really just two sides of the exact same physiological coin.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought, and I encourage you to take immediate action on what we've uncovered in today's explainer. What is the very first habit you will change today to start cooling down your nervous system? Will you cut out that afternoon coffee? Maybe start a simple 5-minute breathing routine? Or simply make the choice to stop checking to see if you feel dizzy? The power to reset your balance, both physically and mentally, is completely in your hands.